Today's guest is Amber Nicole Hayes, author, entrepreneur, and proud mother of two amazing girls. Based in Calgary, Amber left the corporate world to build her own path in design, but her most powerful work has been far more personal. After carrying the secret of childhood abuse for over 25 years, she found herself at age 37 facing deep depression and ultimately her truth. Her memoir, The Obedient Daughter, is a courageous and unfiltered account of breaking silence, confronting trauma, and turning pain into strength. Today, she advocates for women reclaiming their voices, prioritizing mental health, and breaking generational cycles, all while raising her two daughters, who she describes as her greatest why. All right, hanging out with Amber Nicole Hayes. The book that I want to talk to you about is called The Obedient Daughter. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
So this was a pretty powerful book to read. So I can only imagine how challenging, or I can only imagine the process that it was to write it. I read it in, I think, like 3 days, which is an absolute record for me. So just from the way that you did write it, just from your skill as a writer, it was very impressive.
Thank you.
It's a story of your life really up to this point, and a pretty powerful story. So can you kind of give us a context of what it's all about?
Yeah, so it is a memoir, but for me, it was more than that. It was the story about myself as a young girl being able to carry the weight of an abusive home, a mother with borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and an older brother that was sexually abusing me for 7 years. And so the story of trying to overcome that, keep it together, and try and succeed, I say, as a young girl. And then to try and grow up and make decisions that were not necessarily compounded by that abuse. Most of which were, until I was able to uncover it at the age of 37 when my body shut down. And so I started to develop symptoms of MS, and I had depression. And after uncovering everything, it came forward that the secret of sexual abuse that I had been holding in for 25 years was finally having a full toll on my body.
So to kind of manifesting in just everything. Was it mental, physical, like manifesting in all different ways?
It was full physical.
Yeah.
Like my limbs were going numb.
Okay.
3 at any given time was going numb. And I would see doctor after doctor, and they all said, absolutely, you for sure have it. Let's do the testing. And when the testing came back negative, all they had to do and say was, you just must have depression. Here's your antidepressants and a therapist, and go for it.
Right. So up until that point, had you seen therapists, or was that kind of is that kind of what kind of
Unfolded
led you on this journey?
No, so the first time I ever saw a therapist, I had begged and begged my mother to go see a therapist, but she would never go. When I was going through my first divorce, or I guess my only divorce.
Yeah.
Don't tell my ex-husband that.
Yeah.
No, when I went through my divorce, I needed to go and speak to somebody to gain the confidence back, to understand the relationship and the marriage that I was going through was actually abusive. And so to do that, it was when I saw my first therapist. And I've been a strong advocate ever since.
Yeah. So the writing process, I have a ton of questions about the book, but I'm curious about the writing process. When did you decide that you wanted to write the book, and how long of a process was that from the day you decided I need to write a book about this to you publishing it?
So there was a couple of reasons why I chose to write it. The first was that when my secret came out and I confronted my family and they all found out, my mother's first words were, this is going to stay within our family. This doesn't leave our family. Nobody's going to find out. And for me as a survivor, it just felt like one more secret that I was supposed to have to keep because of her. So I said, absolutely not. This is my life, my choice, something that has happened, and I will go forward with how I choose.
Yeah.
And next to that, I had to make a choice. So I could either take my brother to court and press charges and go through ideally a 2-year span, spend the money, go through all of the traumatic memories, and try and get some sort of conviction, or I could take those 2 years and write a book and at least pass the story on to somebody else and hopefully change their life.
Yeah. And so that's what it was, a 2-year process?
Yep.
Wow. did you start on your own, or did you get, I know you talked about having an editor, but did you start off as like, okay, let's go get an editor, let's get, or what is it, a personal project that kind of just started continued to grow, or what did
Yeah,
that look like?
so I signed a contract with a publisher actually and went to writing retreats and that sort of thing. Was working with their cover artists and, their editors. And at the 11th hour, when it came down to it, and I had written 120,000 words, I submitted my manuscript and they said absolutely not.
All right.
Yeah, we will not publish a book that names your abuser as your older brother for legal reasons, and it's too long. It should be 50,000 words.
Oh, okay. So what is this, like, in terms of number of words?
98?
98,000?
Yeah.
And they wanted to be half of what this is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then what did you do?
I said, well, that's not the story that I want to tell, for one
Right.
thing. I
Right.
want to tell my version of the story because that's the truth.
Mhm.
And I think it matters. And I said, I don't care about profits of this. That's not what it's about.
Right.
And I said, they wanted me to name my abuser as a close friend of the family.
Mhm.
And I said, that doesn't create that trifecta of mother, brother, daughter that the abuse cycle was within.
Mhm.
And so I said no. And so they released me from my contract and I self published and created the cover and did everything else.
Nice. Um, what was the reaction to the book? I guess I was thinking about that in two ways. One is obviously from your close family and friends, and then from just, people that maybe were helped by it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I did have family members, my mom's sisters, her family specifically, that were not a fan of it. They don't speak to me anymore.
Right.
I'm okay with that. A lot of them just basically said, you need to, move on with your life. And the fact that you published it is insane. I did have close family and friends that had no idea. And so they reached out and obviously had these emotional, touching words and support. And I couldn't be more grateful for that. And then I also had, 10-minute voicemails that came in and emails from around the world
Mhm.
of people that have read it, that have asked for advice, that have said, when I see you and I've read your story, I see myself. And so actually one acquaintance that I do know, she had the exact same situation. And after reading my book, she came to this realization that she needed to share the secret. And so she gave it to her husband and basically said, this is me. And so that's all she could say.
Mhm.
And so it opened the door for the conversation for her.
Oh, wow. So as I'm reading the book, I was telling you before, there's a lot of just, I'm a few years older than you, but a lot of what you talked about, just in terms of the backdrop of the story, I could relate to. I grew up in small city in Alberta, so very similar to like growing up in Saskatoon. Um, and just kind of that era, and just, so everything that there's just a lot that I could kind of relate to in terms of like, okay, I can picture how you were raised. Like I grew up, hockey. The girls that I grew up with, a lot of them were in figure skating. So it's kind of like, okay, I could really relate to just the way you were telling the story, and that. So that was, I think, part of what hooked me on it. It was like, okay, this is, and so there's a lot of authenticity that you were just able to capture in that way. Um, you have two daughters. Yours are a few years younger than mine. That was another reason why I think I found this to be, really interesting, is obviously, as a parent, you want to make sure that something like this never happens to your children. And but you talk about your daughters obviously towards the end of the book, and they've kind of become your why.
Yeah.
I know when I had my first daughter, a lot of things in my life kind of crystallized in terms of like, oh, things that I thought were important at the time all of a sudden didn't mean anything to me, and
Yeah.
things I didn't realize were important all of a sudden became very important.
Right.
Um, did you find that when you had daughters, that all of a sudden the need to tell your story became greater?
Yeah, I think when you have children, you're basically shining a mirror back on yourself,
Mhm.
right? Is any issues that you've had as a child come shining right back, and you
Mhm.
can't really just push it away. And if you
Right.
do, I would say that, that's not a top-notch parent,
Yeah.
right? And I think being able to look back into that mirror and say, okay, that affected me and I want to be better than that is what people really should be doing. And so I found, especially with my kids, there were certain instances. Obviously, the bath was a big thing, right? And recognizing that they should have the autonomy to make their own decisions and not have to bathe together. Just having that conversation and allowing them to have a voice. When my daughter was 5, that was when abuse for me started. And so I think it kind of clicked in then, right? When my niece was 12, that really kicked in for me. Because if I didn't speak up and I didn't say something, what are the chances that the exact same sexual assault would happen to her, right? And how would I feel in those moments if I stayed quiet?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it absolutely affects everything.
So yeah, because you see your daughters at, like you said, or nieces at those sort of exact timelines, and you think, okay, that was me at that time. And so, but it's interesting because you decided to speak up and you decided to tell your story. One of the questions I was thinking about is, you talk about generational trauma. It's what I find interesting is that, some people, for you, that seemed like the logical thing to do, yet others, it seems like not speaking up is the logical thing to do. And just almost like, I know there's a couple instances in the book when your mom basically says, well, that basically happened to me too. Like, we just deal with it and move on. Like, we don't. So do you think that it's become easier to kind of break that chain, or do you think that's still a something that a lot of people battle with, is that breaking that generational trauma?
I think some people have issues with it. Some people, when they experience trauma as a kid, they immediately forget it, right? They put blinders on and it's like they just block it out. They can't remember it. I think certain individuals obviously have this life's purpose to be able to identify it, to change it, and to break that chain. I think I'm one of those people. I think people of my generation and the age, because there are names to certain disorders like borderline personality disorder, right? Because we have this awareness of what is mental health and abuse and all of these things and what they look like. I think it's so much easier to identify and to say, wow, yeah, that was me. Right. And it's the same reason why I wrote the book, right? Is so that other people can sit there and say, oh my gosh, my brother did the exact same thing to me. And I had no idea when I was, 5, 6, 7 that it was wrong. And so I think people just assume that it's normal until they're aware of it.
Right.
And it was the same thing with borderline and narcissistic personality disorder. When I saw the therapist and she presented it to me, I was completely just shocked because I thought for the entire time of my childhood, she just didn't really like me.
Your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did that help? Like when there was a therapist that was able to give you kind of those labels, did it help you realize that like, I guess sometimes labels can be good, sometimes labels can be bad. For you in this situation, when they were saying, here's kind of what your mom is dealing with, did that help you?
Oh, 100%.
Wow.
Because it gave and put the onus back on her, right? It was never something that I always thought that I had done, right? I was always striving for perfection, to just a small tidbit of love and affection from her. If it was good grades, or, I wore a pretty dress, or I cleaned the house, I would do those things because she expected me to, and so that I would please her.
Right.
Right. When I look at borderline and narcissistic personality disorder, it put the onus back on her. And I could understand at that point that it was that she was incapable of loving me in a way that I needed to be.
Yeah.
Right. And which was normal.
Right.
And so it just allowed me to, I guess, put myself 50,000 feet up in the air and look down from it and know that that's all she was capable of giving.
That's interesting. I always tell my kids that, because I tell my kids probably, well, every day for sure, probably multiple times a day, that I love them. And I always find it fascinating that there's people that grow up with never hearing that. Like, could you, I tell my kids that a lot. I'm like, could you imagine, like, you probably roll your eyes, I tell you that so much. Like, so as a parent, I'm always just kind of in disbelief that people grow up not hearing that from their, and wanting to know that their parents love them, and not, like you said, always, working hard to do everything to be perfect so that you'll actually hear it or feel it someday.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very sad. Limiting beliefs. I was reading a book about beliefs and limiting beliefs, and I was thinking to myself, I don't really have any limiting beliefs. And then when you start, when you find one, you realize, okay, actually I have 1,000. Because what you think of, what I thought of it as limiting beliefs, I thought of them as almost like foundational truths. And so like when you grow up and you know, yeah, I guess like where I'm going with this is you have this belief system that you're kind of brought up with, and then you obviously evolve over time. How hard was that for you to kind of overcome what you just thought of as like kind of like this is just the way the world is? With again your mom telling you like, well, you can't do this, you can't do this, and very, living in a very structured world where it's to kind of, I guess, like lifting those limiting beliefs to kind of become an independent human being.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, with her, I think because my distaste for her, my hatred for her, and dislike started so young in my life,
Hmm.
um, it was easier for me, right? I had this expectation over myself that I was to be a good girl, to clean the house, to be a good wife, to, raise my children, that I was the first to go to university, right? And all of these things in her eyes was just so unnecessary,
Right.
right? And so for me, that fueled it. When I saw that I was the only one cleaning the house, I knew that that wasn't okay. And it just didn't seem fair to me.
Right.
And so I would let those small little pieces every single day fuel me to say, okay, I'm not going to be like this.
Right.
When I get older and I move out, I can be something completely different.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it almost turned into, oh, I'm going to do this to piss her off. I'm going to go to university and get an education to piss her off.
Right.
And then I'll join the corporate world. It'll make 6 figures, and that'll really piss her off. And so that's basically how I push myself to
Yeah.
succeed.
That's and it's interesting. Yeah, like I'll call it a chip. It's a little bit more than just having a chip on your shoulder, but that is sometimes, it's not the healthiest of motivations,
Yeah.
but it's at least, if you can realize it in the moment, it is still motivation, right?
Yeah.
Um, with that, because one of the things that I think about, and I know people that have been in this situation where they're in a family where there's different levels of, I won't say success, but different level. Like every child is different, right?
Sure.
And so if one child is very good at this, um, for some parents it feels natural to be like, okay, well, we can't celebrate that because it'll make your daughter or your sister or your
Right.
your your brother feel diminished. And I'm of the belief that, you know, we should celebrate. If you're really good at something, let's celebrate that. And because hopefully we'll use that to encourage your other siblings. And if they're really good at something, let's celebrate that too.
Right.
It sounds to me like anything that you had that was a talent or a skill was kind of diminished so that other people didn't feel inferior, but also so that your mom didn't feel inferior.
Yeah. And oddly enough, though, those skills and those talents were celebrated outside of our family.
Okay.
And so she would take it, and that's classic BPD, is that she would take it and brag about her family, her children. Oh, my daughter's so beautiful. My daughter's such a good figure skater. Oh, my daughter's going to university. But then to myself, it would be like, no, you don't need to do that. You shouldn't have to do that. And so it was kind of a double-edged sword in a way,
Right.
right? That it was used to benefit her on the outside, and she was a very different person. And so I always found myself, it was, if she wants me to clean, then I'll clean.
Yeah.
And begrudgingly I did, right? And that's just how, it's like before your schoolwork, before you go to work, you're going to clean the house.
Right.
And so you just do things to get by
Yeah.
and to just make life go faster.
You had a quote. You said, "Perfection was a survival skill for myself." What does that mean?
So I would say that I'm still a perfectionist. It's
Yeah.
something that I've struggled with my entire life. And for her, my brother could do no wrong, and he was always on a pedestal.
Mhm.
He got poor grades. So I would do his homework, right? She would ask me to do it and help him with it. And so it was basically just doing everything that I thought she wanted me to do. And it wasn't until later that I started to rebel against that. But it was if she bought a cute outfit and she wanted me to wear dresses.
Yeah.
There was a period in high school where I went months every single day with wearing a dress. Like, it's crazy. Because I just wanted that approval from her.
Right.
So they kind of have a different way of doing it where, like that little trickle, right? It's like you'll do a million things and then they'll give you one little bit of love,
Right.
one little bit of attention. And that's
Yeah.
just enough to keep you going,
Yeah.
right? It's like a mouse and cheese.
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit here and there.
Because I'm always interested, and especially when you do something like write a book, like you have to put yourself out there, right? And obviously with what you've created, you definitely there's vulnerability there. So my question is always, I'm always curious about people's relationship to failure. And I don't know what metric you would use to define, writing a book as a failure or success, but when you're a perfectionist like that, I would imagine it's really hard then to do things because you don't want to look imperfect to the outside world and you don't want to quote unquote fail. So have you learned how to kind of deal with that? Or I guess are you like you said, you're still very much a perfectionist.
Yeah, I'm a perfectionist in certain extents,
Okay.
right? It's like the way I look, right? The way my house is kept, the way, I try not to portray it and push it onto other people unless we have company coming over and then everybody like get to it. We're cleaning the house.
Right.
But yeah, I think in a way of perfection, I feel like I have changed dramatically, but I still suffer with it.
Yeah.
When it comes to, writing the book and having that openness and the success of it, I think having manageable expectations for me was very important. And so I had two specific things of measure that I wanted to write the book that was true to myself, that needed to be told, and with complete honesty, whether it made me look in certain instances like I was not a good person, albeit, the high school, the promiscuity, and all of that kind of thing. For sure, that's a vulnerable place to, expose. But I wanted just to help at least one person.
Yeah.
That was the entire point of it. And if there was no lawsuits happening after that year,
Yeah.
then call it a bonus.
Yeah, no kidding. So then how do you relate as a mother and like, I guess, trying not to kind of put that onto your kids, that kind of perfectionism and stuff? How do you communicate it to your kids that, perfection isn't necessarily the goal or that it is okay to fail?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think perfection comes in a mindset of allowing children to be themselves, right? Allowing them to have a voice, allowing them to make their own decisions. And so when it comes to my kids, if they want to be in grade 3 and show up with a full face of makeup because they like it, absolutely go
Yeah.
for it. If they want to, get out of bed, not shower, no, brush their hair, then okay, we're doing that today. They want to have their rooms a certain way. They want to, love certain interests. Then by all means, it only matters to me that they're good people.
Yeah.
And that they try their hardest at whatever they do. And whatever their choices are, I will always love and support them.
Yeah.
No matter what.
I actually had a question about going back to the book. Like I said, two things. One is I thought the book was great, but I'm also always curious about like just the process of writing. So as you were writing, it took you 2 years. Did you ever find that during that time there was resistance? I'm using the word resistance because a book series Stephen Pressfield does a great book series. I think the first book in it is The War of Art, but he talks about resistance when you're trying to do something like writing a book would be the perfect example. Did you ever have moments of resistance when you were doing it where you thought, you know what, I'm not going to write this, I'm not going to do it? And if so, how were you able to overcome that?
There was never a part of the story that I tried to convince myself not to write. I knew going into this that I had to be and show the utmost vulnerable, part of myself. I had to be honest. I had to tell all of the things, whether, it shone a dark light on myself. For me, there were days where, I just said, I can't write this part today. And I had to put myself into a mindset. So I wrote the book not from start to finish, but through chunks. And I would write, a portion, like say the final chapters at one sitting. And then I would start with the beginning. And so I wrote it in bits and pieces so that for me, it wasn't a chronological, time frame of where I felt exhausted and re-traumatized.
Right. Yeah.
Because that was part of it, right? You look at the intervention, for example, that's one of the chapters that was very difficult to write. Or any of the sexual assaults, right? You put yourself back into those moments and you ground yourself. And it's, you close your eyes and you think, okay, what do I see? What do I smell? What do I feel? What is going through? And, unfortunately, but fortunately, I can do that with myself and my memories.
Yeah.
Is that I put myself back into those places very easily.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have I remember when I was a kid, I was in the like super young, probably 3 or 4, but I was in the hospital for quite a long time, but just certain smells bring me back to like
Yeah.
like it'd be as if I'm like smelling hospital food again or something like
Totally.
that. And
Yeah.
I don't have the memory of being there, but the smells and stuff, like as soon as you can kind of recreate certain things, it's like, oh, you have the feeling of being there again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, it was the same. It was, thinking of my mother and the nicotine, right? The cigarettes, or the tea that she drank, or the dentine gum, or, all of those pieces. Those
Yeah.
were kid moments that reminded me of her.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I found it very important to be able to, from an artistic standpoint, is to bring the reader back into those moments with me.
Yeah. I was thinking about just the concept of courage, because obviously you are faced with moments. I feel like there's a lot of moments in your story where there's almost like a fork in the road where you could decide to, just kind of, I guess, listen and just do what you're being told,
Yeah.
or kind of like the moment of like, you know what, I'm not going to do this. You mentioned, I think the one, which is when you decided, you know what, I'm just going to, I'm going to, shower by myself now. And you kind of just like, that was kind of just the way you wrote it seemed to me like that was like almost like you were scared of what the reaction was going to be. You went to Chicago once, like without, and it sounded almost like there was maybe a slight regret, almost only because you put your friend in kind of an awkward situation with that.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of like an fu to your mom and to some degree to your dad, and then even moving to Calgary. I had a whole list, like, getting your university degree. There was moments where I know, like, the comments being like, oh, you think you're better than everybody because you did this, or you think you're better than everybody. But I feel like there was just moments of courage, and just, thinking about that, and, if someone's listening who can relate to what you went through, do you find that if you just can make that one courageous decision, that it helps you the next time you need to find the courage to do it again?
Yeah. If you think of, I guess, a relationship between yourself and either an abusive partner or a parent that you just find yourself needing to feel free from, think of it as like a Velcro, right? It's like one little click, another click as it's opening and separating, right? And each decision allows you to have a little bit more freedom and gives you the strength to make another choice and another choice. And eventually, when you get to the point you're strong enough, you can separate and create those boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 100% exactly what it is. It's helping yourself mentally realize that you deserve better and that this is not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels to me like you're at a moment, like, because you're happily married,
Mhm.
or I'm not, I guess I shouldn't tell you that. I should ask you that. But in the book, I'm just going based on, so, but I felt like there was a moment where in your current marriage where, that could have ended as well. Right. And then, so again, a moment of courage to be like, I need to share with you what happened. And it feels as though it brought you guys closer together. It helped him understand maybe why you were doing certain things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, in any given situation, my main reason for pushing him away was because I didn't want to talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Always thought it would be a secret that I would carry with me and I would take to the grave. And I had never any intentions of sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was so much easier to just push him away and push him away until I realized that if I kept doing that, I would see my kids half the amount of time.
Right.
Right. And I wasn't prepared to do that. And I still loved him. I wasn't ready to stop fighting.
Right.
And so the honesty of telling him that, yeah, he absolutely could have sat there and said, well, whoa, that's way too much.
Yeah.
Like, I'm out of here. This is nuts.
Yeah.
But the fact that he listened and came back to me and said, okay, I want to know what's going on, really showed immense maturity and support from his side.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's still something to this day that I think surprised me because if you look at my first marriage, when I fell down the stairs, right, for me, that was that one key moment in a relationship or marriage that either makes or breaks you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that broke me. And
Yeah.
so he didn't love and support, wasn't there for me, so I'm out. And so this was the exact same situation, but he chose the opposite direction.
It also sounds like he has a good mom in that I feel like she was kind of helping him, kind of guiding him in that situation.
Yeah.
Having good in-laws is important.
It is. It is. She is very supportive, very helpful, a great mother-in-law. And yeah, the fact that she has always sat there and said, give her a chance, hear what she has to say,
Yeah.
and has been that motherly figure for me, allowed me to see that moms can be very different than what
Yeah.
I knew.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. Um, a, a lot of what I kind of think about, and I'm coming at it from a totally different perspective, but so I want to get your perspective on is when you go through, something that you've been through, it's not like, okay, I've talked about it, I've dealt with it, it's over. I feel like it's something that, you have to, you deal with on a daily basis, right? So for me, just in my life, I try to focus, or I do focus on daily habits, and mind, body, soul. And so I'm wondering for you personally, are there things that you do on a daily basis to kind of help you stay grounded so that you can be, you know, as good of a wife, friend, mother? Do you have tricks, and whether it's like mind, like fitness, nutrition?
Yeah, I think fitness is key for anybody who's dealing with mental health issues, right? Depression is something that has followed me for a number of years going through all of this.
Hmm.
And so it's something I constantly work at every single day.
Hmm.
So, fitness, nutrition, putting good things into your body. I meditate every single day, red light therapy, that sort of thing. And then identifying if I am going through something, do I need to go see a therapist for this
Hmm.
moment, right? Not being afraid to tackle it head on right when it starts, I think is
Hmm.
super important. But also, I think from a grounding perspective and an appreciation, I allow myself to sit in moments where I watch my children and just sit in my surroundings and have a sense of gratitude.
Hmm.
And I think that is so important to know how far you've come and that you're absolutely killing it.
Yeah. No, and I love that. My oldest is now 15 and she loves reading. Like I will tell you that she was the reason I started reading as much as I did, because when she was a kid, she had to, like, I had to read books to her, and I'd have to read it again and again. And um she's still like that at 15. And so now, as they get older and they're teenagers, they'll have moments where they want nothing to do with you, and then they come back and they'll want to talk to you. So just last night, she was telling me about this book, and it was like, it was like 45 minutes of her describing this, and at no point did I want to break up. It was just like, hey, just
Give
keep telling me, and like having those moments, you know what I mean? Because it's just like, yeah, it's so you talk about gratitude. It's like, having kids and wanting to be engaged with you is just like the coolest thing in the world. Um, Therapy is something, like you mentioned, that your mom didn't never wanted to, she resisted therapy, but it was something that you wanted at a young age. I'm curious because I've never went to therapy. I don't know that I'm against it, because I don't think there's anything necessarily bad about going to therapy, but as a kid, I don't think I ever would have made that suggestion. So how did that come to you as a we could solve these problems if only we could go to therapy?
I always felt like I never had a voice,
Yeah.
right? And in any type of relationship and even parenting, right? It's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would always tell us that, oh, it's a two-way street. You need to do this. And if you want me to show you this, then you need to do this for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was kind of tit for tat. But if you ever had an opinion about something, it was never welcomed.
Right.
And so I knew that I just desperately wanted a third person who was neutral, who could say, okay, just wait and let her talk
Mm-hmm.
and share your voice and your opinion and your thoughts
Yeah.
and allow her and make her sit there and listen to them. And so for me, I thought that that would be so helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I always wanted that Hallmark family that, laughed at the dinner table
Yeah.
and had a great time. And I know that my dad did too. And so it was something that I never, ever stopped wanting.
Yeah. Okay, super random question.
Yeah.
When you said red light therapy, I was because I've heard about it before, but I actually don't really know what it is. So, what is the what is it and why? Because I've heard there's benefits, but I'm just curious. This is more like a personal
Joe,
curiosity.
I think I'm probably going to butcher the purpose of it. I know that it's really good for your skin, good for your immune system.
Hmm.
For me, I love the warmth of it. It's like a modern day tanning bed that does nothing but good things for you.
Yeah, like what is it?
That's
What
what
does
I
it actually
feel.
look like? What is the like? What is the?
I have basically like, I don't know, a 12 by 14 kind of red light. And so
Okay.
I put on a Calm app
Yeah.
and I listen to a meditation, and it's actually EMDR that goes through your headphones.
Okay.
And so it helps rebalance you. And
Oh,
then I soak that in at the same time.
okay.
It's just something to de-stress at the end of the day.
I like that. And you mentioned that you know the physical like physical activity, but you connected it with mental health. For you, what's the connection there?
I think a lot of the times, some of it's rage for sure, right? When I was going through all of this, I had a punching bag
Yeah.
and would just beat the complete shit out of it.
Yeah.
And I would break down crying. And
Yeah.
for me, it was a release of those energy, right? And so now I look at it as something to gain energy from,
Yeah.
right? Gain strength, gain fitness, have stronger, crisper lungs because of it. I see it as a source to allow me to be there longer for my kids.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's so important.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So habits are one thing that I'm kind of obsessed with, and then I guess the next step on that is goals, and breaking the book down into, I guess, different kind of areas of your life. You always seem to have you always seem to have a goal, right? Like, you were in cheer.
Hmm.
Is it called cheer or cheerleading?
Yeah, same.
Yeah, okay. Which, like I said to you, I think before we started, I had no idea until recently that cheer was as huge as it absolutely
Yeah.
is. So, yeah. Um, but going to university was a big goal of yours. Um, Even when you decided to get separated and ultimately divorced, I mean, you kind of broke it into like, okay, I'm going to find a. So I guess for you, have you had in your life an overall goal of where you want to be, or have you always just kind of chunked it out into like, here's my next goal, here's my
Yeah.
next goal?
Yeah, more of that.
Yeah.
I have always have had the goal of never wanting to stop learning, never wanting to stop evolving,
Hmm.
right? And never stop wanting to be a better person and
Hmm.
making a difference in people's lives. So that has always been steady throughout. And how I achieve that, I guess, depends on where I am in my life,
Hmm.
right? And as I look back, yeah, it was, goals in cheer, goals in university, getting the degree, getting that divorce, getting away from my mother, right?
Hmm.
And it was always one thing after the next. And for me, I honestly don't know where I want to be in
Right.
5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
But I do know that I never want to stay and live in the past.
Yeah.
Like I don't go back and want to be a cheerleader now, right? I
Yeah.
don't want to rejoin the corporate world,
Right.
right? And I have no regrets about leaving that marriage,
Yeah.
or even going back to before the book was done. But I can't see myself, in 20 years still talking about this book.
Yeah.
As long as it's doing its thing and making the difference and it's out there, then for me, I've done my job.
Yeah. So talking about identity, I guess, in terms of, you don't want to necessarily go back and revisit things. You were quite successful corporately. You're now, I would say, an entrepreneur. You do design, is that right?
Yeah, I do children's interior design.
So because here's where I'm always interested. I feel like when people walk into kind of an identity or a role, they have a really hard time transitioning to, let's say, like some people who have really successful careers, they have a challenge becoming a mother because, well, who I was before is gone.
Right.
You seem to kind of transition from role to role fairly easily. Has that always been the case?
Yeah, I would say so,
Yeah.
right? I think it comes from a point of being a child and having to be whatever anybody wanted me to be,
Yeah.
right? If you think about it that way, as a good student, as a good daughter, as a good figure skater, right? It's like whatever you needed, I was there in this chameleon
Yeah.
that could always change, right? And you compartmentalize your life and just tuck it away.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the same for me. I always give 110% to everything that I do. And so children's interior design actually came to me from working in the corporate world and caring more about, what does my office look like and what do these presentations look like, and kind of generating that creativity that has always been there.
Right.
And so as it unfolded, though, when I understand that when I was a young girl and a teenager, my bedroom was my safe place, right? And
Okay.
so it was the place that had a small inkling of personality of myself after, I asked to paint it differently and to have different artwork.
Yeah.
And so it was a place that I could feel like where I belonged. And so creating those safe spaces for young kids was kind of where that came from.
Yeah.
And to be able to, if I can't change their world and their parents and the relationships they have, at least I can give them a place that feels serene, that they can escape to at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important thing. My kids, their rooms are I'll say dumpster fires, but like we were talking about doing renovations, and my daughter is this. And we watch a lot of shows where they'll come in and like basically rip the house apart and then put it back together.
Yeah.
And my daughters are like, man, if they ever like mess with our rooms, like so it's interesting to know that and to remember that as a child, that is like kind of a safe space for them, their own sanctuary. So it's interesting that you kind of evolved into focusing on that for people.
Yeah, it came out of nowhere, and it was a niche that, I think even at the time my husband was like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
But as it evolved and it evolved into uncovering the abuse and the book and everything else, it all came full circle and made perfect sense.
Yeah. So kind of wrapped up in identity is, finding the importance of people finding their voice, I'll say.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's really hard. We live in a world where people say be yourself, but which is one of those things that is, simple but not easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we want to say, things that we feel people will be agreeable to. Like we don't by nature want to be contrarian or whatever, right?
There's so many societal norms and expectations, right?
Yeah.
Especially now of youth, right? Is the way you look, the social media that you have, right?
Yeah.
The followers that you have, how many likes and comments, right? It's, what size of jeans do you wear? Do you have the nicest of shoes and makeup and Sephora and Starbucks and all the things, right? And all of that is all superficial,
Yeah.
right? It's not about who you are as a person anymore, which is what it should be.
Well, and it's funny because, in schools, they always talk about, being an individual and being unique, but then they'll also send things home. They're like, this is how you make sure that your kids fit in. And I'm just like, so they're telling them to be individuals, but as a group, like, I'm just like, this goes against everything that they're pretending to teach, so it's super frustrating. Yet at the same time, obviously with my daughters, I don't want them, going around saying like, well, I don't know, I want there to be some sort of like uniformity and stuff like that. But I think we're very good at, letting them be their individuals. So when you were saying that, when I was reading your notes, as reminded, because sometimes as a dad, I'm like, okay, you're allowed to fight back. You're allowed to, like, if I'm asking you to do something and it doesn't make sense to you, you're allowed to say, well, no, here, Dad, this is why it doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
And we're on a trip. My youngest daughter, I think, is more of a like a people pleaser. She
Mm.
wants everybody to feel good and to feel, and I would say to her detriment. So we went on a daughter dad ski trip. So we were at a couple, and we had rented this camper van, and so she was super excited. But everything I'd ask her to do, she would be like, "Yes, sir," and she would do that without question. And I was like, "I know that you're trying to be like,
Appeased.
appease, yeah, and I appreciate that, but I'm like, you're allowed to ask me why am asking you to do that, or if it doesn't make sense, you're allowed to say. So I'm really trying to instill that into
Yeah.
them, where it's just like, I'm happy that you're trying to make everything easy, or you're trying to be agreeable, but it's not always the best thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Well,
hard to
that's
teach your kids
scary,
that.
right?
Yeah.
So when you think about it and she gets older,
Hmm.
and especially if she's saying yes sir to you, right?
Hmm.
You're the most dominant male figure in her life,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So then when she becomes 16, 17, 18 and she starts dating,
Yeah.
right? Or 30 or whatever you're
Yeah.
going
Oh,
to
yeah.
allow,
35
right?
to 40.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you got to wonder if she's going to be that submissive in those
Yeah.
instances as well,
Yeah.
right? And so my oldest is very similar to that. She's very shy, very timid. And so empowering her to have a voice and to stand up and say no
Yeah.
is so important,
Yeah.
right? And it comes to the whole thing of consent, right? It's one of the biggest parts of this book that I wanted to get out there,
Mhm.
is that even nowadays, the amount of people that have said, "Oh my God, I haven't even talked to my kids about consent,"
Yeah.
and they're 6 and 8. And it's like, well, now is a great time,
Totally.
and you think about just being able to make those choices and to have the autonomy over their own bodies,
Yeah.
right, is so, so important.
Well, you think about, like, I know when I was a kid, it would, you're always told, like, if whoever was leaving the house, oh, give them a hug, or give your auntie a kiss, or whatever it was. And like, I'm not saying we collectively, I'm saying, like, I think like me and my brothers and sisters would be like, you just kind of had to
You
do
did.
that, you know?
Well, it's like when my grandmother died,
Yeah.
right? Go give her a hug and a kiss, and she's this dead body
Yeah.
that it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
right? But saying no was never an option.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I was talking about my kids, yeah, actually this morning, because I was thinking about that, and like you said, because my wife's always been very good at having those conversations with them. But if, like, example, this weekend we were visiting family in Toronto, and hey, if you want to give them a fist pump, if you want to be like, see ya, like, there's no,
Yeah.
there's no, and I'm like, but you guys know that, right? Like, we've talked about that enough, and they're like, yeah, like, they kind of like, yeah, Dad, we understand that. So it's awesome that that is kind of becoming more of the norm, where kids at a very young age kind of have that autonomy.
Yeah, I do believe that that seems to be a bit more common,
Yeah.
right? Where I see that there's still opportunities is talking to, like in the book, I talked to my oldest, who was probably 8 at the time,
Yeah.
right? And we had the conversation about relationships, right? And getting involved with a partner, whether it be, a boy or a girl or whomever you choose, right?
Mhm.
But being able to say yes instantly, right? Or in the moment. And then as things unfold, you still have the option to say no,
Mhm.
right? You can still say, nope, I'm sorry. I said yes before, but I'm uncomfortable now,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I think that in itself is so important.
Yes. I think so too. And having that, and I think then also reinforcing it as they get older, because what that means to them as they get older will change too, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe what they can comprehend at a certain age. Obviously, as they get older, it's just like, it has to be reinforced and, I guess, talked about in a way that's like, okay, this is now appropriate to the age that you're at,
Right.
or maybe have a deeper understanding of it. So I use the word happy, and it's I like to talk about the concept of happiness, because I think people think about happiness as like this superficial kind of concept of maybe almost like blissful. Like,
Right.
people think of like happiness as like, maybe like getting high or getting drunk. It's like
Right.
this constant state of happiness. But to me, I see happiness as almost like when you've been through something. So for you, when you've been through a journey, it's almost like having been through all of that. Are you able to look at it from the other side, and are you happy in life right now?
Yeah, I would say that I'm happy in life.
Yeah.
I think happiness is something that, comes in moments, right? It comes in, you know, things in life that you receive, if it's, a daughter, right, or 2 daughters, or the fortune of having a good job, right, and being able to provide for your family. The the evolution of being able to come through something and see it on the other side and still be strong enough to talk about it. Those are happiness in those moments, right? Going through EMDR and being able to remove all of the emotion from those traumatic moments, that is happiness, right? And so I don't see happiness as this, massive elusive feeling that we're always working towards, right? It is something that I think from a daily basis, that as long as you're able to get up and to go forward and to live your life with purpose and intent and be able to make a difference, whether it be for yourself, for others, for your family, in a positive way, I think that's where happiness comes from.
Yeah. Do you think that you could have found happiness without, like, so all the things that happened to you as a kid, you could have just said, okay, I'm not going to go to university. I'm not going to, like, all these goals that you set out for yourself. And or you could have decided to do kind of like what your mom did, was just say, well, this is what happens, and suck it up and deal with it. And just, do you think you ever could have found happiness without going through all of the challenges that you went through, writing the book, confronting your family, going to therapy? Do you think,
Without doing all of the work,
yeah,
basically.
do you think you could have turned your
Life.
we talked about the fork in the road.
Yeah.
Do you think you could have taken the other road and still found happiness?
Okay, so imagine 5-year-old me,
Yeah.
after the first sign of abuse, being able to have the confidence to make the kids' help phone line call and to be removed from that and to be taken into a completely different family, right? That perhaps was loving and supportive and completely on the opposite spectrum of where I came from. That's unrealistic, absolutely, but it could have been an option, right? And I think about that. But I also think that everything happens for a reason. I know people hate that saying. I know they do. And that's fine. But I think there are certain things that happen to us in our lifetime for lessons to be able to be taught to us, right? To have that change in the transition through life, that, this thing's going to happen and I will learn something from this thing that will help me in the next part of my life.
Right.
Right. And, call it spiritual, call it, whatever. But I honestly think that.
Now, is that something that you think in hindsight, or is that something you believed at the time? Like, were you able to think that at any point while you were going through something? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at my first marriage wedding day,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so there was this calm feeling that came over me. And I've only had it a couple of times in my life, but it was this insane calmness that basically spoke to me and said, this will not be your only wedding, but you need to go through with this. And so that for me was the moment that I knew that this wasn't going to be my life, but that I had to keep going.
Yeah. Wow. So at the end of the book, so as I'm reading this book, because you had a lot of, like, you were obviously it came across as you're being very honest in the book and very, very articulate. And you obviously did not have a very good relationship with your mom. And then towards the end of the book, she gets sick. And so how challenging was that for you? Because, you're obviously still wanted to be there for her on some level.
Yeah.
Just maybe.
Yeah, I
talk
think,
about that.
when you're raised in that type of environment, you have this expectation, right? There's so many expectations. It's like you give your, grandparents a hug, right? You do all of these things that you're supposed to do. You call her once a week because she expects it, right? I knew that she would expect me to be there, so I was. And I think for myself, I didn't want to have any regrets, right? And I knew that if I showed up, if I supported her, if I, was there by her side, then that would be enough. Where I took back my autonomy and my onus is when I left before she passed away.
Right.
And for me, that is one thing still to this day that I'm so proud of.
Yeah.
To say that I will choose my daughters every single time because I want them to feel chosen.
Yeah.
And do I still struggle with feeling chosen? Yeah, absolutely. It is one thing that I still need to work on. But I never want my girls to feel like that.
Absolutely. You've always had a strong relationship with your dad. How has that dynamic then changed since your mom passed away?
That's liberating, actually,
Yeah.
right? To be able to call him, to talk to him, to spend time with him where it's just us and there isn't that secrecy. There isn't that lie that we need to make up in order to go to breakfast before we go to Home Depot,
Right.
right? To be able to have the relationship that I've always wanted is truly, I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah.
Um, it's never going to be enough time in my eyes.
Yeah.
And I would love for him to move here and move on in and just be there every day. My girls love him so
Yeah.
much. Um, he deserves happiness too. And I know he's been through a lot. And that's
Yeah.
why I've never held it against him, because I knew where he was in his own life and his marriage.
Yeah. So if there was a message you could give to people, and obviously you have given them many messages through the book, but if someone listening to the podcast who's dealing with something similar challenges that you went through, because I can only imagine that there's a situation of like, where do I even start? Because they probably understand that it's going to be a long journey. And so they're at that fork in the road where they're like, you know what, I could just say, fuck it and just
Mhm.
not do it. Or
Yeah.
I could go through this battle. What advice would you give to someone in that situation?
Gosh, if it's something very similar to mine, especially with sexual abuse or sexual assault, I think speaking to somebody was my first very big um, moment, right? The first time I ever spoke it, like those scary movies where bugs come flying out of your mouth,
Yeah.
right? That's what it felt like for me. It felt like this poison that was leaving my body. And it really was like this visceral moment for me. So I would say that that is absolutely key, whether it's not a family member or somebody, you don't have to, acknowledge that part of it.
Yeah.
But even if it's a therapist or a complete stranger or send me an email, I could be an ear for sure.
Yeah.
And then finding similarity, right? Reading my book or reading books of other people that have been through sexual abuse to find that it is completely common. It is not your fault and it should never have happened. But to hear everybody else's stories, it kind of brings a sense of commonality to it, right? That you're not alone.
Yeah.
So, and I think after finding that, it gave me the strength to keep going, to keep moving.
One of the things that when I read it, I thought was interesting, and you mentioned a couple times is when I think it was when you and your family, came together so that you could confront your brother. And I don't know if it was in that situation or shortly after where your mom said, this doesn't leave the family.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about it. And just that, to me, it kind of looks like she wanted to kind of maintain the control over the narrative.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, this isn't your decision to make. This isn't your story to tell. To me, like that's such an interesting, because you could have given her that, and then, but that would have been like, okay, we're going to go back to the hierarchy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you chose not to.
Yeah, that was another fork in the road for sure.
Yeah.
The first thing, I think throughout this entire process of her finding out, there was always re-injury every single time that she was involved or every single time that there wasn't a phone call, right? I think about it in that I had no intentions of telling my family, or her especially, but I had to tell my dad. And so after he kept it for a week and sat on it, he broke down and then he said, I have to tell her.
Right.
And so he told her, and 3 days go by without her contacting me. And then when she did finally reach out, her very first words were, well, why didn't you just say no?
Yeah.
Right? As if that was ever an option to us as kids.
Right.
The fact that she was making us bathe together as we were both going through puberty, right? It's just unfathomable. So having her take that side was another re-injury, right? And then having the control of, no, we're having a meeting and you're going to come here and you're going to sit down and have this conversation was also re-traumatization,
Yeah.
right? You think about that, and that moment alone was one of the moments of my life where I had to be the most strong.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of myself for getting through that. So I look at that, and then I look at her, wanting to just completely let it go, right? Telling me to move on, that I've got too much time on my hands, that I need to get a life, basically. And her just dismaying everything, right? So for me, that was another re-injury. And so then once she's committing all of those, I finally have the power and the strength to say, I need a healing separation,
Yeah.
right? These are all these little things that I'm reading in the books of
Yeah.
support and survivors, right? And so that for me was one of the best things that I ever could do. And I felt if there was ever a hill to die on, it was this,
Yeah.
right? Who would I be if I didn't stand up and say no, right? What kind of example was I showing my daughters?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting that I think you've obviously your daughters have been kind of your reason, like you said at the beginning, it's your why, but it's like, well, no, I want to be, when you have a mother that you don't necessarily look up to, it almost, really empowers you to be like, yeah, I actually want my daughters to look up to me and and see that I'm making the choices that a mother can make. So very cool. Um, Another thing that I think about a lot is, and you mentioned it actually a couple times, is just the concept of evolution. So when you look ahead, you've written a book, um, you obviously helped a lot of people. What's kind of next in your process or journey?
If I know that, when you have a dream, putting it out in the world, right, in order to hopefully make it happen,
Mhm.
right? And for my dream goal would be to put this, onto TV and make a limited series of it.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think there's enough conversation around incest and sexual abuse within a family, right? You look at the conversations about borderline and narcissistic personality disorder, there's never any of that, right?
Mm.
And then to add on domestic abuse on top of that, right? It's just this trifecta that no matter who you are, you're affected by at least one of those,
Yeah.
right? And so I think the message is so important to be able to put it out there. And for me, that would just be a massive way to do so.
No, this is great. I'm really, I was grateful to, well, our friend Bob kind of introduced us. So yeah, when I saw the book, I definitely wanted to read it. Like I said, I think 3 days is a world record for me. But just very, very well written, very, I think, just open, honest, candid. So hopefully a lot of people get to read it, and I think people it doesn't necessarily have to be just, women who have been affected by it. I think having guys read it, dads read it, brothers read it, and understand, because it's important for people other than just, former victims to understand people's perspectives in this, right?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think just the visibility around it, right? We may not even consider that this could happen to somebody that we know,
Yeah.
right? But it is ultimately so common. And yeah, that's why I wrote it in short chapters so that men could enjoy it as well.
Actually, I will be honest with you. I think is what I really liked about it, because if you can just easily get through a chapter and then, okay, the next one's short too. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the hack that you did, which yeah.
Yeah. And there it tries to weave in a little bit of humor in and
Yeah.
out, in certain bits and pieces. And yeah, it's not an easy read by any means, but I think being able to understand it that women do go through this, that consent is something that is non-negotiable to talk about with our children, boys and girls, right?
Yeah.
I think it has a number of messages in there that are very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for coming in and share your story. Thanks for writing the book, and yeah, I'm interested to see the next step in the process. So thank you.
Thank you.